Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Energy News Beat. We have an ESG special today. My name is Stu Turley, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group. And we've got some great talent today. I've got a all-star lineup here. And we're going to go through the horn. And as we introduce everybody, I can bring up their information. But let's start with Kat Galloway. Kat, how are you today?
Doing great. Calling in from lovely Austin, Texas this afternoon. So happy to be here, Stu.
Oh, I am looking forward to it because next week we're going to have another podcast. We're going to cover Bitcoin mining and ESG on that kind of a portion of it. Who would have thought ESG is needed with Bitcoin?
Hey, energy and Bitcoin are going to go together because they solve each other's problems.
I wish they saw my bank account. My wife would like that. And we have Tracy Woods. He is a VP at the American Association of Blacks in Energy. Tracy, welcome, and fantastic to see you. I have thoroughly gotten to enjoy getting to know you over these last year. And welcome, and your expertise in energy policy and social is so much needed. Thank you for piling in.
Thanks for having me, Stu, and I'm looking forward to this conversation with Kat and Andrew. So thanks for having me.
And we've got Dr. Andrew here. Doctor, how are you?
I'm good, Stu. I've been looking forward to this since you sent out the invite a few weeks ago.
Well, I have to tell you, we all have a passion for ESG, and we all are in the energy. Three of the four in this environment are experts. I just have an expert wannabe. So as we sit back and we want to set the tone, we're in an energy crisis right now, guys. And that energy crisis has been brought on by, I'm going to ask what you guys think about the energy crisis, what brought it on. And I'm going to throw you out there in just a sec. And Tracy, I'm going to start with you. Why do you think we're here now?
I think that when we look at the climate, another term, we use climate crisis. And I think when we finally agree on what the science tells us and the risk to the folks who follow us. Someone said we borrow the planet from the folks who follow us. So I think that's where we look at energy being the lifeblood of commerce and, right, important to developed nations and those developing. How what we do with energy gets to be, looking at that puts us squarely into this crisis. That's what I think, Stu.
All right. Well, Kat, your thoughts?
Well, Stu, I've been supporting the environmental side of ESG for nearly 2 decades now, even before ESG itself was even coined. So I think, with my background and focus on the energy business, specifically since about 2010, I'm really excited to talk about and to learn and discuss how we can reduce our emissions across the energy sector. So that's really my focus and what I'm excited to talk about today.
All right. And Andrew, your passion kind of in our last podcast was really kind of cool. You went to Boulder, which is a very renewable oriented kind of a place. And you ended up at Texas A&M, and then all of a sudden you're working in the oil and gas field. Go figure that one out.
Yeah, that was, if you ever want to be culture shocked, go from Boulder, Colorado to College Station, Texas, and tell me how it turns out. Quite the change, right? And yeah, I've told you before, I didn't really want any part of oil and gas as a career option. It was something that didn't interest me, and I studied climate at A&M. Climate change is what interested me and making a difference for people. And what I quickly learned at A&M was that oil and gas companies are not just oil and gas companies, they're energy companies. And the impact that they have on the world it's mind-boggling, quite frankly. And so I was fortunate enough to do some work with them in graduate school at A&M, and it opened up my eyes and really led me down the path that I'm on today.
That's a pretty cool start. Tracy, you had to start as a lineman in the power side. Tell us just a little bit on that, because that tells you that you have known where it starts at the bottom of the pile, and that is very critical.
Yeah, you're right, Stu. Yeah, my second job was as a lineman. I started as a meter reader, and then got to climb poles and do a lot of cowboy things. But you're right. At the very beginning, with the customers, you talked about communities that are impacted, frontline communities. And so for me, growing up in Philadelphia, these are folks, and what I realized is that they paid their energy bill. That was the first thing they paid, and a lot of times it was, there were choices between that and other things. And so always kept that at heart, because I started, running in and out of people's homes, and then as a lineman, seeing, things up front. And it's been great for me as a career, and particularly here at ABE, when you advocate for communities of color, which tend to be those that are underserved, low and moderate income. It's fantastic to be on the policy side, and particularly at this time when we're all collectively, globally talking about ESG. Who knew then that I'd be doing this today, but excited to do it.
Well, Kat, when you sit back and you take a look, you said you've been doing this for a little while, and you've got a passion for ESG. ESG has got the environmental, the social, and the governance, but we're not going to get to the renewable within 10 minutes. I mean, it's going to take some time. How do you think energy tech is going to play into this?
Well, I think, Stu, you're absolutely right. I mean, let's talk about that energy transition, right? So I personally support fossil fuels. That's been my background in my career. I also support renewables, solar, wind, hydro, and I love all of these really interesting projects that are coming out there to work on substitutes for the fossil fuels. But I think we also need to talk about the concept of that transition to low carbon fuels. According to the U.S. Department of Energy, actually more than 96% of all manufactured goods are directly touched by the chemicals industry, right? This industry greatly influences our safe water supply, our shelter, clothing, healthcare, computer technology. And what are the feedstocks for that chemical industry? Fossil fuels. So we can talk about moving to more renewable sources of fuel for our cars or electricity, but with my background in chemical engineering, we need to recognize that those feedstocks for our plastics, our pharmaceuticals, our fertilizers, those are all coming from the oil and gas industry. So we're not going to transition totally away from plastics anytime soon. Right. But what we need to do is we need to keep innovating new sources of energy, but we can't take our foot off the gas on improving the environmental impact of our fossil fuels. So I think, as we look into what technology is coming into the oil and gas space, what I'm really excited about right now at Artemis Energy is looking at technology that allows our oil and gas industry to capture and to harness energy that would traditionally be flared or destroyed as a power source. And I want to take that power and I want to mine Bitcoin off of it. So we're taking off-grid power, working with producers across the energy sector to do that, to reduce our waste, reduce our emissions, while also being rewarded for that Bitcoin in the free market. So I'm very pro innovation. And I think we've got a lot of great projects going on.
Boy, you just said a mouthful there, Kat, and I'm taking notes on all this. I got notes on Tracy. I got all this. And one of the things that I did not realize is how much power Bitcoin actually uses. It is not ESG friendly.
Well, that's a good point, because you have to look at where that power is coming from, right? Yep. Is it coming from a coal-fired power plant? Is it coming from something renewable? Is it coming from wind, solar? You need to look at that mix of where that energy is coming from to support the Bitcoin mining. And that's why I'm a fan of off-grid. So here in Texas, for those of you who are listening who were here maybe last February, when we had that huge storm, we lost all of our power. It was a nightmare. I had to go rescue family members from across town who were without power for a couple of days. It was a really serious event. And so for me, mining Bitcoin, I don't want to pull power from that grid when other people need it. Plenty of people are mining from the grid, and that's fine. That's just not personally what I want to do. So I'm looking for these off-grid sources, getting power, getting energy in from other sources that are considered wasted. So yeah, it is a lot of power.
It is. And I just didn't even realize that at all. And in fact, Tracy knows about the storms. You've had to go out and help people with that as well. So, I mean, you know storms.
That's
so,
right.
And
you're right. And what Kat is doing, Stu, with the mining, Bitcoin mining, and really capturing methane. So we know in the latest legislation now that's going to be funded, when we look at this focus on methane, the impact on the environment, and again, methane in the part of so many operations, but to take what would be waste and now being focused on and to leverage that and use that. I mean, again, in the past, yeah, we knew about methane, but where was the market for methane? And now Kat's found a solution because Bitcoin is here. The incoming mayor in New York is talking about the city being focused, city being a financial center, being focused on Bitcoin and other technologies. And so, win-win. So, when Kat, Artemis Power, what you're doing there, Artemis Energy, just pretty slick. And I think that, Stu, from Abe's perspective, I love that Kat started off talking. Yes, she supports fossil and renewables because I think the transition has to include all those things, plus some of the neat things that you talk about, like hydrogen, You
bet. Oh, those are great points. I did not realize that about the New York City thing. And then Andrew, you brought up a lot of great new points about Colorado and the transit. What are your thoughts on some of the transition issues that Kat and we're sitting here trying to figure out on what's going on here? And Tracy brought up.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the core, right, you can't have the energy transition without oil and gas, right? That it just simply doesn't work. And you look at kind of the climate that we're in now and the attitudes towards oil and gas, and it's kind of frustrating because you can electrify anything, right? You can electrify cars and houses and trains and buses and whatever. But I think a lot of people don't consider the fact that electricity is made, it's not harvested, right? You have to actually produce electricity. And, when you think about where we are now and where we want to go, the intermediate bridge there is natural gas, right? It's 50% less CO2 than coal. And yet we continue to shoot ourselves in the foot in the United States by fighting infrastructure that would promote the use of natural gas, which is crazy to me. And what should concern everyone is the recent statistics that have come out recently that said coal use is on the rise for the first time in 14 years.
That's amazing.
That's an incredible statistic when you think about the conversations around reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. And yet here coal is creeping back into the picture more and more. I told you the last podcast you and I talked to, here in Colorado, a state that prides itself at being at the forefront of green technologies, still sees electricity generation by coal exceeding the national average. That's a crazy statistic to me, right? When you go plug in your Tesla at night, I mean, if it's being charged.
I don't want to interrupt, but did you just see all of us cringe? I mean,
it's crazy.
Kat, and Tracy and we all cringed. I even cringed again, and I even knew that. Sorry, Andrew.
It's just wild, right? And so I think that when you kind of consider where we want to go by, net zero targets are all 2040, 2050, and natural gas, the oil and gas industry has to be that bridge. And there are low carbon alternatives that we offer that can help bridge the gap. And I really hope that people start to kind of understand that because like Kat said, and like Tracy said, at the end of the day, I think the new energy economy is not one individual, it's not dominated by any one energy, right? People want to tell you renewables like wind and solar can be baseload powers. They can't. No one has shown me that they can. I refuse to accept that. It's going to take
Nice open mind. I like that about you.
It's going to take a holistic approach. Renewables will be part of the energy portfolio, but people are going to have to come around on nuclear, geothermal, hydrogen is making some really cool, I think, progress. It's going to be a much more diverse energy economy in 50 years.
Oh, this morning I even saw a couple things. I did not know that California is the largest importer. Okay, their coal use has gone up just like Colorado. Didn't know that as well either until about a year ago when our research team was figuring this out. Nobody knows that coal is going up in California. Did you know that California is importing the largest amount of oil in the world from the Amazon forest? The Amazon forest is being destroyed because of California's importing of oil. Go figure that bad dog out. I was like, holy smokes, and they're supposed to be energy. They've got the highest cost of energy in the US. They're the Germany of the US.
I just saw an article on that today, actually. So it's funny you bring that up because I did just see an article that made that point. But, it's the same thing on the East Coast. We can't get natural gas pipelines to Boston, so they have to offload LNG in Boston Harbor. I mean, it's the same logic. And it's crazy when, people, you want to reduce flaring, allow us to build the infrastructure to send that gas somewhere, right? I mean, there are simple solutions that I think the policies, climate policy and environmental policy, actually, it's counterproductive to what it's trying to achieve.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay.
We lost you.
Oh, that's my wife says that's when I'm best, is when my mic is muted. So, when we talked about the infrastructure bill, has some really, really good things in it. It's got some really, really bad things in it. And when you take a look, it's actually got more oil and gas in it than people even realize. They slid in on the natural gas as a renewable, and nobody knew about that. And I mean, isn't that amazing that they did that? They kind of, that's in the infrastructure bill, and I think that's going to help.
You and I had that conversation, and very surprising, because we know the prevailing conversation before this legislation was that natural gas was a fossil fuel. Certainly, as Andrew said, 50% of the output or GHG output of coal, but still a fossil fuel. But looking at it as renewable, and I in ways it needs to be in the conversation. So that part is good, but the definition is a little bit baffling. But I think that when we talk about natural gas, bans and some of the things that are going on at particularly at state levels, Andrew talked about getting things permitted and infrastructure built out. We're going to need that infrastructure. Although I still scratch my head, as you said, as natural gas is a renewable. So, but it's good to see the legislation is still and the funding. But our work is never done, because it is about eventually getting those projects moving forward. And I'm sure Kat and Andrew know part of the challenge that is, right?
Well, I think a lot of this is we're talking about messaging to the public, and we all are sitting here as energy. Y'all are energy experts, and I'm a wannabe. But we all know the behind the curtains kind of thing going on, that the oil companies have not done a good job in the past of articulating, hey, the good things. They've not done good things. And then, the other renewables have not done a good job articulating the right or talking back and forth. But Kat, this brings up another thing coming around the corner. The old school, let's just say oil and gas, has going away. We're not attracting new young talent that really is on board with the ESG, Kat. And what are some ideas that you have to attract new client or new young talent to this area? You all look really young and talented to me, but hey, I'm old. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think that's a great point, Stu. I mean, for me as a woman in the energy business, I believe that we have to start that within our own homes, right? We've got to teach our children. We've got to teach our communities. We need to get people involved in STEM education, bringing all people, all walks of life to this industry. And so I like to support STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. You can add arts to that and make it STEAM. But I really think that that's the way that the energy industry needs to bring forth new talent, support diversity, as well as continuing, having a workforce that's going to be with us across generations. So, I love to see companies sponsoring these programs, engage with elementary school, middle schools, scholarships, and just bring in a lot of different people into this energy fold, support their careers. There's a lot of things that we can do on that side.
Tracy, you and I have had a lot of conversations on diversity and inclusion, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to work and see a lot of the podcasts and productions. And what are some of the thoughts on having energy, not just oil and gas, but everybody having more diversity, inclusion, everything? What is Abe trying to do and helping in that area?
Yeah, appreciate that, Stu. And you're right. We've had several conversations that become, very much a part of our work. It's mission critical. And what we find, first of all, is the data. The industry, the energy industry, we everything that we do is really around data. We remember, a whole conversation about climate change. So what does the science say? And, when we look at energy, oil and gas, or electric and gas utilities, or even renewables, there is driven by data. So what we're doing in the diversity space is really taking a look at what does the data reflect. And so interestingly enough, when we look at, we just co-authored a report with E2 and a group called Black Owners of Solar Services and a number of other nonprofits, but it was really looking at diversity in the clean energy space. And so we take a look at different sectors, and actually the report could have equally been entitled the lack of diversity in the clean energy space. And so part of the challenge for our clean energy partners is, an industry that has blossomed relatively late when you compare it to oil and gas. But when we look at the board level and leadership level, there's a lack of diversity. And here, the good news is, we've been having this conversation for some time with those in the renewable energy space, clean energy space. And that early conversation is leading now to some action. So for us, it's really about the data and showing what's going on. Believe it or not, Congress again is having all of energy in for workshops. And so there was a New York Times article I believe it's earlier this year, that really looked at the energy space. And again, this diversity challenge, if you will. And so when you have to come in and answer to Congress, that's, at least get your attention. And so right now, the conversations are about what are you doing and how can we as a government help? And we've been involved with that. And so we're seeing some traction now, and very necessary, particularly as we start to do infrastructure. So what we know, last point on this, is what gets measured gets done. And so when we get beyond the conversations to some data, again, it's germane to what we do in the industry, but let's measure our progress, and we'll get that done, in my view.
You know what that is? I love that quote, what gets measured gets done. And that goes right on into Andrew's SPL and the ESG. I mean, you think we're all just, let me throw out a bone over here to Andrew and watch him just go totally nuts on something. What do you think about ESG, Andrew? So what do you do over at SPL? Because I mean, I'm going to wind you up. Okay, go get like you did on the other podcast. What do you think about some of that stuff at SPL?
So real quick, just to piggyback off Kat and Tracy's comments, one of the frustrating things about, I think, getting more youthful involvement in the oil and gas industry is simply exposure. And it's really frustrating. One of the biggest things that drew me to Energy Strong was the mission to educate and advocate for the industry, right? Because like Kat said, it starts in the homes, it starts with the conversations we're having. Proud Papa moment. There's here in Denver, there's a Civitas oil rig a couple miles from my house, and my son is infatuated with it. And over the weekend, he said, "Papa, let's build an oil rig with Legos," which made me really, really proud. Anyway, but getting that interest,
Did you strike any oil, or you like?
No, no, it was kind of an odd looking oil rig. It was not conventional by any sense, but getting that interest and the positive interest, and it's so hard. We have a program at Energy Strong to get more energy out there in schools, and to go to schools and talk to kids about what we do in the industry. And good luck cracking that wall. I mean, maybe in Texas, they're more open to that program. But here in Colorado, I mean, you cannot get into schools to talk about oil and gas, period. I mean, it's very hard to do. And when you do it, you're under very strict supervision. And so, the oil and gas industry right now, I think one of the rallying cries is take back that narrative. And it's really hard. I think it's a question that everyone's scratching their head with, because you just have a faction that just doesn't want to listen to it. And it's very discouraging. Kat, I think you have something to say.
Oh, I saw her. We all did.
No, I'm just vibing off of everything you're saying. This is a picture that my daughter did in elementary school when she was in second grade. And all of the second graders did a little art project.
Nice.
And so I was just
that looks very much like me trying to draw a flamingo. That is an excellent flamingo by me. So great job.
It was great conversations around the dinner table too, just to see, all of the kids doing that.
Yeah. And I think the education's got to come around the corner for all energy. Let's have a discussion. Tracy, you see that all the time up in DC. This is one side over here, this is one side over here, and you try to bring everybody together, and you're going just shaking your head sometimes.
And you know what, Stu? And Kat talked about the education. I think it's great, where she shared about the oil and gas particularly, and how it's perceived. One of the things that I share all the time, which I got from our colleagues in oil and gas, I tell folks, look around the room where you are. And if it's not wood or steel or stone, it's coming to you from the oil and gas industry. And so then that leads to some interesting conversations. For the women in the audience, I say, well, cosmetics. All right. And a multi-billion-dollar industry that is. Okay. So if you leave it in the ground as some have proposed, there are whole industries. And Kat talked about plastics, so that education, we find that is not as ubiquitous as we might think. We're in the industry, and I think sometimes we say, duh, but, petrochemicals and what this means in our culture, in a developed culture, we spend a lot of time educating folks. And then when you see the light bulb go on, Stu, when people say, I never thought about that. And so then, we can't banish them, or, so how do we collaborate? And then understanding, for folks often that the oil and gas industry is very much concerned about a clean energy future. Okay. And having the planet be here with folks on the planet, right. So
it's a great point, Tracy, because that's a talking point I use with a lot of people, right? Show me one oil and gas company today that does not have a climate change and sustainability tab on their website. Like, everyone is very much open about it, and we're all working towards the same thing. So the conversation in the country feels polarized. It feels like you're on one side or another, but I wish we could just bring it more to the middle and say, like, I love to go skiing and I work in oil and gas, and I want there to be snow so that my kids and grandkids can ski. I care about the same things you care about, and we can get there and we can do it together. We don't have to fight. Like, it can be done collaboratively.
Yeah.
I'd like to hug you, but no.
Well, and I think that comes through on our policies right now and how divisive everything is, right? So I may be a little bit off the norm on this, but I mean, I fundamentally believe that the best energy policies, it would be for the government to just get out of the way and let the market drive that innovation, right? So yes, we need a regulatory framework. We need to be able to protect human health, conduct our business safely, and not, damage the environment. But I think that less government is better government. So take, for example, Texas. I'm always going to come back to Texas, right? Here, some industries have banded together and to form what was called the Texas Methane and Flaring Coalition, of which Texas Alliance of Energy Producers is a supporter. And they have banded together to proactively reduce flaring in the oil field, not because there is a regulatory requirement to do so, but because these oil and gas operators have some sort of intrinsic environmental and economic value to do that, right? So over the last couple of years, according to some data out from the Railroad Commission that regulates oil and gas here in Texas, it's a strange name, but they're the oil and gas regulators. Between June of 2019 and May of 2021, the percentage of gas flared from the total gas production in Texas decreased by 72%.
Wow.
Not because there was a policy that said that we had to do it, but because our market rewards it. And these energy producers who are paving the way and reducing those emissions, they're setting their own internal targets, right? They're doing their own ESG reports. They're setting to eliminate their flaring. And they're doing this because they want to, because their shareholders, their investors value those emissions reductions, and they're making it happen. So I would like to see government kind of get out of the way and let the free market, prop up the ESG programs.
I'm going to agree with you. And I'm going to also say some regulations are good. The early on, the oil companies did not do a good job. Can anybody hear this? The yard guys are out there, and this is like, I want to reach around and go, not now.
Yeah, but no, I mean, we need to make sure we're producing safely, right? We have to have, everything from the ground, all of that needs to be coming out safely. We need to have, some basics, right? We don't want acid rain. We don't want particle pollution, right? So, we can have a framework, but I don't think that, propping up markets with carbon taxes or doing other externalities such as, forcing ESG. I personally don't think that there should be a requirement for ESG, such as the SEC is talking about right now. I think if companies want to do it, that's great. Go for it. But yeah, there should be some fundamental backbone to making sure everyone's safe about it.
I think investors are also saying a little thing different. They're saying, hey, if you ain't ESG, we ain't investing in you. So there you go, market. And that's part of the market. So that's a very good point, Kat. What we're going to do now is we're going to go around the horn here for just a little bit. And then this will be we really want to find out your thoughts on how we get to, let's say we're at the end of 2022 and we're now doing a prediction. So, you sit here, Andrew, Kat, and Tracy, we sit down and we go, what are my predictions for 2022 and how can we educate and get to renewables and lower carbon footprint? I'm going to go ahead and put you on the spot. Tracy, you look like you're really thinking. You're going first.
You said, how can we put renewables in a lower carbon footprint, at the end of 2022? What does that,
how can we get to the ultimate goal is to get to renewables with a lower footprint, but we got to deliver the lowest kilowatt per hour, which means we still got to use fossil fuels. Right. How do we get to low carbon footprint nirvana by 2022, 2023? What are steps that you think we need to take?
Yeah, I think you just with our crystal ball today, we're seeing pain at the pump. And when we see the administration trying to figure that out, and there've got to be some activities and solutions in the next 12 months, certainly. That's what consumers expect. And I think that conversation or the activities that'll happen, we see, the reserve, tapping the reserve and other things like that. I think that broadens out the conversation, where it's not just renewables. All right. Just, hey, let's go all in renewables. So I think that's a part of it, Stu. I think that we start to really realize, spend more time with OPEC plus, and particularly with Saudi and where they're going, right? And this hydrogen part of the conversation starts, because we know oil and gas is there, but that somehow hydrogen doesn't get in the conversation. So that is a part of it. And so when we get closer to the end of 2022, 2023, some of the euphoria about, let's go with all the new stuff, we start to look at a more balanced approach and say, listen, there is a place for nuclear and these other. And so now the conversations get to be more of what we know as practitioners in the space that they need to be, and not imbalance. That's my. Yeah, I think that's what we'll see.
I think you just stole a lot of thunder, but okay, Andrew, you're next up. What are your predictions on how we get there next year?
So I think it'll be really interesting to see what people's perspective is following this winter, right? We've heard a lot of teasing about it's going to be a La Nina winter, and it's going to be real cold, and it's going to be real snowy. Yep. Now, it's kind of hard to believe when here in Denver on December 2nd, it's 75 degrees and we haven't had snow in 220 some odd days.
Right.
But assuming that the Farmer's Almanac and other predictions do pan out, I think it's going to be a rough winter for a lot of people, right, with some real high energy bills. I mean, take Texas, what happened in Texas last February, and make it a national crisis. And it'll be interesting to see what people's perspectives are, and what they do to pressure the administration in terms of their policy approach to infrastructure and production domestically. I think a lot of people, you're going to see a lot, even more so. I mean, 2021 ESG was talked about, but man, the pace that this whole movement is moving is just hard to believe. I mean, Kat, I don't think you probably expected to start a new company that was Bitcoin focused, at the start of the year. And now here you are, right? But you're going to see a tremendous amount of investment, Stu, I think, in carbon capture and sequestration. Yep. You're going to see, I think, carbon markets really start to come to the forefront with producers are going to start more and more generating offsets, buying offsets. Yep. So carbon markets and CCS, I think, are going to be two huge segments that come to the forefront more so than they are even now in 22.
I like that. Wow.
I agree.
And we got a nice little crystal ball going on here. And then Kat, you're going to have the last word.
Getting out my crystal ball. Hey, I agree. I agree with both of you on what you're saying here. I think that another thing to think about is that as we rely on foreign oil, how do their emissions compare to U.S. domestic, right? So if we're moving to lower carbon, yep. I don't have the data because I don't think anyone has done that study, but I find it hard to believe that anyone in OPEC Plus is doing it better than we are, and we are measuring it and we are tracking it. So for me, I think that focusing in on our U.S. domestic oil is a great place to start. I also think that innovation is going to continue to drive both the oil and gas and the renewables spaces. We need to have a bouquet of all of the different forms of energy, and that's how we'll get through it. So I think we're going to see a lot of innovation. I think we're going to see some really cool market happenings going on in the next year. And I hope in a year from now, we can look back at this podcast and say we were right on it.
Well, you guys are invited back next year because we're going to do a review. We got the tape, we got it. It'll be in transcript. So we're going to fact check yourself and me and everybody else. But I'll tell you what, I had an absolute blast with all of you all experts in every area that we've been covering, and I can't wait to have you guys back again. And Kat, you and I get to talk next week. And then that way we're going to see the traction on your podcast versus the other guys. So
No pressure.
yeah, well, I guarantee you'll probably do better. But anyway, Tracy, thank you very much for stopping by the podcast. Kat, very, very nice to meet you. And then Andrew, man, your passion again shows through, and we are just thrilled to even have you here. So thank you all very much.
Thanks for
Thank
setting
you.
this up.
Thank you
Right.
for the opportunity.
Appreciate it.